The wedding dress hung like a ghost in the executive suite's closet, its crystalline fibers catching the light from 3 different stars visible through the panoramic windows of Nexus Station. Kalen Voss adjusted his ceremonial collar for the 100th time, watching the orbital traffic dance around the massive space station that served as humanity's first true interstellar capital. "Sir, the consortium representatives have arrived," his aide announced through the door. "The ceremony begins in 1 hour." Kalen nodded to his reflection, though something cold settled in his stomach. Today would cement the most important trade agreement in human history, a marriage bond with the enigmatic Veltar Empire that would open 17 star systems to human expansion. His bride, Nixora Quenvel, was not just any Veltar noble. She was the daughter of their supreme archon, and their union would make humans equals in the galactic community for the first time. He'd met Nixora only 3 times during the lengthy negotiations. She was beautiful in that otherworldly way of her species, tall, graceful, with skin that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, and eyes like liquid mercury. But more than her appearance, it was her intelligence that impressed him. She spoke 7 languages fluently, understood quantum economics better than most humans, and had suggested 3 improvements to their terraforming technology that his best engineers were still trying to fully comprehend. The perfect diplomatic bride. Almost too perfect, Mr. Voss. The voice came from behind him, soft and melodic with that distinctive Veltar accent that made every word sound like music. He turned to find Nixora standing in his doorway, having somehow bypassed his security without triggering a single alarm. "Nixora, you shouldn't be here. It's supposed to be bad luck for the bride and groom to see each other before I need to tell you something." Her mercury eyes held an expression he'd never seen before. Fear. About what I am. About what this marriage really means. Kalen felt his pulse quicken. In all their meetings, she'd never shown anything but calm composure. "What are you talking about?" She stepped into the room, and the door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. "My father didn't choose me for this union because of my diplomatic skills or my knowledge of human culture." Her hands trembled as she reached up to touch something at the base of her skull. "He chose me because of what the Veltar military did to me when I was 15 years old. Nixora, I am not just Veltar Kalen. I am something else. Something that your species has never encountered before." Her fingers found a hidden panel beneath her hairline, and with a soft click, it opened. Beneath was a neural interface, unlike anything in Veltar technology, angular, aggressive, with bioluminescent circuits that pulsed with an alien rhythm. Kellen's blood went cold. He recognized that technology. Every human alive knew those designs, from the history vids, from the nightmares that had plagued their species for 3 generations. "That's Kithran tech," he whispered. The Kithrans, the species that had nearly wiped out humanity before mysteriously vanishing from the galaxy 20 years ago. The species that had turned entire human colonies into nightmare landscapes of biological horror. The species that had given humanity its desperate, driving need to reach for the stars and never be trapped on one world again. "Yes," Nixora said, her voice barely audible. "And tomorrow, when we are married, and the neural bond ceremony begins, every consortium world will learn exactly what the Kithrans left behind in their wake." The emergency council chamber aboard Nexus Station had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Kalen sat at the head of the polished conference table, his wedding attire replaced by a simple black suit, while 12 of humanity's most powerful leaders stared at the woman who was supposed to be his bride in less than 6 hours. Nixora stood at the center of the room, the neural interface at the base of her skull now fully visible, its alien circuits pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. Admiral Reeves, head of the Consortium Defense Force, had her hand resting on her sidearm, while Dr. Elizabeth Cray, the foremost expert on Kithran technology, couldn't seem to stop taking readings with her scanner. "The implant is definitely Kithran in origin," Dr. Cray announced. her voice tight with barely controlled excitement and terror. "But it's not like anything we've seen before. This is ... integrated. Symbiotic. It's not just attached to her nervous system, it's part of it." "How is that possible?" Secretary of State Hendricks demanded. "The Kithrans have been gone for 20 years. You're telling us they were experimenting on Veltar children?" Nyxora's laugh was bitter. "Not experimenting. Preparing." She moved to the holographic display at the center of the table, her movements fluid despite the tension in the room. "May I?" Kalen nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to maintain distance. The woman he'd thought he knew was rapidly becoming a stranger. The hologram shifted to show a star map of the local galactic arm. Nyxara gestured, and dozens of systems lit up in red. "These are Kithran Seedworld's planets, they infected with their biotechnology before they retreated from this sector. The Veltar Empire has been monitoring them for 2 decades, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Admiral Reeves asked. "For them to mature." Nyxara touched her temple, and the neural interface pulsed brighter. Suddenly, the hologram exploded with new information, detailed schematics of Kithran bioships, genetic modification protocols, and what looked like blueprints for some kind of galactic communication network. "The Kithrans didn't disappear, Admiral. They evolved. And they've been using species like mine as ... incubators." The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Kalen felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. "You're saying the Veltar knew about this?" "Not the Veltar as a whole. A small faction within our military, led by my father." Nyxora's expression was pained. "They made a deal with the Kithrans before they retreated, in exchange for our cooperation. In monitoring the seed worlds, they would share their advanced biotechnology with us. They chose children from noble families for the initial integration experiments. And you were one of them. I was the most successful." The circuits under her skin flared, and for a moment, her eyes went completely black. When they returned to their normal mercury color, she looked exhausted. "The others didn't survive the process, but I did, and over the years, I've learned to access the Kithran collective memory network." Dr. Cray leaned forward. "What kind of information?" "Everything. Their true purpose for retreating, their plans for this sector, and why they specifically requested that I be married to the leader of the human consortium." Nyxora's gaze found Kellen's across the table. "They want access to human neural patterns. Our species has something they need for the final phase of their evolution, which is the ability to survive quantum consciousness transfer." The words hung in the air, like a death sentence. Humans are the only species they've encountered that can maintain individual identity. During biotechnological integration, every other species they've tried to merge with loses its sense of self within days. Admiral Reeves stood up abruptly. "So this whole marriage arrangement is a trap. The moment Kalen and I complete the neural bonding ceremony, the Kithran Collective will have a direct pathway into human consciousness. They'll be able to study our neural patterns in real time and begin mass integration protocols across all human worlds." Kalen felt the weight of 7 billion human lives settling on his shoulders. "And if we don't go through with the ceremony," Nyxora's expression became grim, "then the Veltar Empire will consider it an act of war. But more importantly, the Kithran seed worlds will activate anyway. My father's faction has been preparing for this possibility. If they can't get human neural patterns through marriage, they'll take them through conquest." The chamber erupted in arguments and shouted questions, but Kalen heard none of it. He was staring at Nyxora, seeing past the alien technology in her skull to the woman beneath. "Why are you telling us this? Why betray your own people?" Her answer was barely a whisper. "Because in the 3 times we've met, you've shown me something I thought the Kithrans had burned out of me 20 years ago." She touched her chest, over her heart. "You've shown me what it means to choose hope over survival." The observation deck of Nexus Station offered a view of the wedding venue, a massive crystalline amphitheater that had been constructed in the station's central hub specifically for the ceremony. Thousands of dignitaries from across the consortium and Veltar Empire were already taking their seats, unaware that the event they'd come to witness might trigger the extinction of both species. Kalen stood at the reinforced viewport, watching the controlled chaos below, while his mind raced through impossible calculations. Behind him, the emergency council had been arguing for 3 hours without reaching a consensus. The quantum torpedo strike could work, Admiral Reeves was saying. If we target the Kithrin seed worlds, simultaneously 17 different star systems. Dr. Cray interrupted. Even if we had the ships in position, which we don't, the ecological damage would be catastrophic. We'd be committing genocide on a galactic scale. Better than letting the Kithrins complete their evolution, Secretary Hendricks countered. If what Nyxora says is true, they're planning to subsume every intelligent species in this arm of the galaxy. Kalen turned away from the viewport. Nyxora sat alone at the far end of the conference table, seemingly calm despite the neural interface that continued to pulse with alien light. She'd been silent for the past hour, her mercury eyes fixed on something only she could see. There's another option, Kalen said, cutting through the arguments. The room fell silent. We go through with the ceremony? Absolutely not, Admiral, Reeves snapped. That's exactly what they want, is it? Kalen moved to stand beside Nyxora's chair. Tell me something. When the Kithrins made their deal with your father's faction 20 years ago, did they explain why they needed human neural patterns specifically? Nyxora looked up at him, and for a moment, the alien technology seemed to recede, leaving only a young woman carrying an impossible burden. They said humans had achieved something they called quantum consciousness coherence, the ability to maintain individual identity across multiple dimensional states, and they assumed this was a biological trait. Yes, they believe it's something in human DNA that could be replicated through biotechnological integration. Dr. Cray frowned. But quantum consciousness coherence isn't biological. It's cultural. It's the result of 10,000 years of human philosophical and scientific development. Our concepts of individual identity, our understanding of consciousness itself. Kalen nodded. Exactly. Which means if they try to extract it through forced integration, they'll get the biological pattern, but none of the cultural context. Nyxora finished, her eyes widening with understanding. It won't work. The integration will fail. Worse than that, Dr. Cray added, excitement creeping into her voice. If they attempt mass integration based on faulty data, the feedback could destabilize their entire collective consciousness network. Admiral, Reeves stood up. You're talking about using your cells as a weapon. The neural bonding ceremony creates a permanent link between your minds. If the Kithaeron collective accesses that link and attempts integration based on false assumptions, the resulting quantum cascade failure could propagate through their entire network, Kalen said, potentially destroying every Kithaeron consciousness in this sector of the galaxy, and killing both of you in the process, Secretary Hendricks pointed out. Kalen looked at Nyxora. That's the choice, isn't it? We sacrifice ourselves to save both our species, or we let billions die to save our own lives. Nyxora reached up and touched the neural interface. There might be a way to survive it. The Kithaeron technology in my skull has been learning to interface with my Veltar consciousness for 20 years. If I can maintain control during the initial integration attempt, you could redirect the quantum cascade, Dr. Cray breathed. Channel it away from your own neural patterns. Maybe, but we'd have to complete the bonding ceremony first. We'd have to actually marry, create a genuine neural link between us. Nyxora's gaze met Kellen's. It would mean sharing not just consciousness, but everything, memories, emotions, thoughts, complete psychological integration. Kalen felt something shift in his chest. In the space of a few hours, this woman had gone from being a diplomatic necessity to the most important person in his life. Not because of politics or trade agreements, but because she'd chosen to trust him with the truth, even knowing it might mean her death. "I've made worse deals," he said softly. Nyxera smiled, the first genuine smile he'd ever seen from her. "The ceremony would have to appear completely normal. If the Kitharans suspect we know about their plan, then we give them the performance of a lifetime." Kalen turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we're going to a wedding." Admiral Reeves shook her head. "This is insane. You're basing the survival of human civilization on theoretical, quantum mechanics, and the hope that a woman with Kitharan technology in her brain can somehow redirect a consciousness cascade that's never been attempted before." "Actually," Dr. Cray said thoughtfully, "there is one precedent for this kind of quantum consciousness manipulation, where," she smiled grimly, "human fiction. Specifically, our science fiction literature from the past 2 centuries. We've been theorizing about this exact scenario for generations. If human quantum consciousness coherence really is cultural, rather than biological, then our entire literary tradition might serve as a kind of psychological blueprint for surviving consciousness integration." Kalen felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep in his chest. "You're saying that all those stories about humans fighting alien mind control might actually save us?" "I'm saying that humans have been preparing for this fight for longer than we realized. We just never knew it." The crystalline amphitheater hummed with the combined voices of 10,000 beings from across 2 stellar empires. Kalen had attended state functions before, but nothing compared to the sheer spectacle of a diplomatic wedding designed to unite species that had evolved under different stars. The Veltar delegation occupied the eastern section of the amphitheater, their bioluminescent formal wear creating patterns of light that shifted in response to their emotional states. The human contingent filled the western half, a more subdued but equally impressive display of humanity's finest diplomatic and military representatives. Between them, scattered throughout the central sections, sat representatives from a dozen other species, all here to witness what they believed would be a new era of galactic cooperation. If only they knew what was really at stake. Kalen stood at the altar, a platform of crystallized space-time that existed simultaneously in normal space and hyperspace, allowing the ceremony to be witnessed by beings across multiple dimensional phases. His formal suit had been modified with Veltar's ceremonial elements, threads of living light woven through the fabric that would respond to his neural patterns during the bonding. The music began a harmonic convergence of human orchestral tradition and Veltar bioacoustic resonance that seemed to make the very air shimmer. Kalen watched the processional entrance with his heart hammering against his ribs, knowing that Dr. Cray and her team were monitoring every quantum fluctuation in the amphitheater from their hidden position in the station's sensor array. Appeared at the far end of the aisle, and for a moment, Kalen forgot about Kitharan conspiracies and quantum consciousness cascades. She was magnificent. Her wedding gown seemed to be made of captured starlight, flowing around her like liquid energy. The neural interface at the base of her skull had been artfully concealed by her ceremonial headdress, but Kalen could see the faint pulse of its circuits through the translucent material as she walked toward him. He caught glimpses of the beings in the audience. Veltar nobles whose bioluminescent displays grew brighter with each step she took. Human diplomats trying to maintain proper decorum while clearly being overwhelmed by the spectacle. And there, in the front row of the Veltar section, a figure whose presence made Kellen's blood run cold. Archon Velquin Nyxera's father and the leader of the Kitharan conspiracy. The man who had allowed his own daughter to be turned into a living weapon. He sat perfectly still, but his bioluminescent display pulsed with patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Nyxera reached the altar, and her father stood to perform the traditional transfer of familial bonds. "I present my daughter Nyxera to join with Kalen Voss in the sacred union of neural bonding," he announced, his voice carrying easily through the amphitheater's acoustic systems. "I accept this bond freely," Kalen replied, following the script they'd rehearsed. But as he spoke, he saw something flicker behind Nyxora's eyes, a moment of contact with something vast and alien. They're already trying to access the link, he realized. The Kithrans were monitoring the ceremony through the neural interface, waiting for the moment when the bonding would give them direct access to human consciousness patterns. The officiant, a neutral party from the Zephyrian Collective, began the formal ceremony. We gather here to witness the joining of two minds, two species, two hopes for the future. The neural bonding will create a permanent link between these souls, allowing them to share thoughts, emotions, and experiences for the remainder of their lives. Kalen felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the amphitheater's climate control. In the audience, he spotted Admiral Reeves sitting with the human delegation, her expression carefully neutral. 3 seats away, Secretary Hendricks was maintaining his diplomatic smile while probably calculating the political fallout if their plan failed catastrophically. Do you, Kalen Voss, accept the neural bond with Nyxora Quenneville, knowing that your consciousness will be forever intertwined with hers? I do. The words came out steadier than he'd expected. Do you, Nyxora Quenneville, accept the neural bond with Kalen Voss, knowing that your consciousness will be forever intertwined with his? Nyxora's pause lasted perhaps 2 seconds too long. I do. The officiant gestured to the neural bonding device, a piece of hybrid technology that combined Veltar biocircuitry with human quantum processors. Please place your hands on the consciousness interface. This was it, the moment when everything would either work perfectly or fail spectacularly. Taking most of the galactic core with it, Kalen placed his hand on the smooth, warm surface of the interface. Nyxora's hand joined his, and immediately he felt a tingling sensation as the device began mapping their neural patterns. The bonding will now commence, the officiant announced. May your minds find harmony across the void. The device activated. Kalen felt his consciousness expand instantly, rushing outward from his skull like water breaking through a dam. For a terrifying moment, he experienced absolute dissolution, no sense of self, no individual identity, just an overwhelming flood of alien sensations and memories. Then Nyxora's mind touched his, and suddenly, he wasn't drowning. Her consciousness wrapped around his like a protective embrace, guiding him through the torrent of shared experience. Stay with me, her mental voice whispered. Don't let them see how human minds really work. Through the link, he could feel them vast, cold intelligences pressing against their joined consciousness like ice against glass. The Kithrans were here, trying to parse the quantum patterns of human awareness, trying to understand how humanity maintained individual identity during consciousness transfer. Now, Nyxora's thought came with urgent intensity. Together, they opened their minds to the Kithran Collective, but not their real minds. Instead, they projected a carefully constructed false pattern, a fake quantum signature that made human consciousness look like a simple biological process that could be replicated through technology. The Kithrans seized on the false data hungrily, already beginning the process of integrating it into their collective consciousness network. Across 17 star systems, the seed worlds began activating their biotechnological systems, preparing for mass integration based on what they believed was the secret of human quantum consciousness coherence. 3 seconds, Nyxora warned him, when they realize the data is false. The realization hit the Kithran Collective like a quantum storm. The false consciousness patterns they'd integrated into their network began creating cascading failures throughout their shared awareness. Millions of Kitharan minds, linked across light years of space, suddenly found themselves trying to process impossible quantum states. The feedback was instantaneous and devastating. Through the neural link, Kalen felt the Kithran Collective consciousness beginning to collapse in on itself, each mind trying to maintain coherence while the false human patterns created recursive loops in their shared awareness. Hold on. Nyxora's mental voice was strained, but determined. I'm redirecting the cascade. The neural interface at the base of Nyxora's skull blazed with light as she fought to control the quantum consciousness cascade tearing through the Kithrin collective. Through their shared link, Kalen felt her pain, not just physical, but the agony of a mind trying to contain forces that could shred reality itself around them. The wedding ceremony had descended into chaos. The neural bonding device was sparking and smoking, its hybrid systems overloaded by the massive data flows passing through it. In the audience, Veltar nobles were flashing alarm patterns while human diplomats shouted questions that no one could answer. But Kellen's attention was focused entirely on the battle being fought in quantum space, where Nyxora's consciousness was the only thing standing between the Kithrin collective collapse and complete galactic catastrophe. The cascade is spreading faster than I can redirect it. Her mental voice was tight with strain. Their network is too integrated. When one node fails, it's creating resonance patterns in all the others. Through the link, Kalen could see the scope of the disaster. Across 17 star systems, the Kithrin seed worlds were experiencing massive biotechnological failures as their controlling intelligences lost coherence. But instead of simply shutting down, the automated systems were entering emergency protocols designed to preserve Kithrin consciousness at any cost, including the consumption of every other intelligent species in range. Nyxora, he projected urgently. The seed worlds are going active. They're preparing to forcibly integrate every sentient being in their systems. I know. I can feel them reaching out. Her mental voice carried a new note, determination mixed with something that felt like goodbye. Kalen, I need you to do something. The human consciousness patterns we fed them, they were false. But they were based on real human cognitive processes. What do you need? I need you to show me what makes human consciousness truly unique. Not the false patterns we created, but the real ones. The quantum coherence that lets you maintain individual identity during consciousness transfer. Kalen understood immediately, and the knowledge filled him with cold terror. If I show you the real patterns, and they're still connected to your neural interface, they'll get access to genuine human consciousness data. Yes, but they'll also get something they're not prepared for. Through the link, he felt her plan forming. It was brilliant, desperate, and almost certainly suicidal. Human quantum consciousness coherence isn't just about maintaining individual identity, she continued. It's about the ability to choose that identity, to consciously decide who you are, moment by moment. If we can inject that concept into their collective network, while it's already destabilizing, it's single quotes LL force every Kithrin consciousness to confront the concept of individual choice. Kalen felt a grim smile forming. Their collective mind isn't designed to handle millions of individual decision-making processes simultaneously. Exactly. But I need genuine human consciousness patterns to make it work. And once I have them, you'll have to let the Kithrins access them directly. He was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of what she was asking. Nyxora, if this works, it won't just collapse their collective. It'll probably kill you too. Maybe. But if it doesn't work, they'll recover from the cascade failure within hours. And next time, they won't make the mistake of trusting false data. Around them, the chaos was intensifying. Admiral Reeves was shouting orders into her communication device, while Dr. Cray ran toward the altar with a portable quantum scanner. But they were operating in normal time, while the battle for galactic survival was being fought at the speed of thought. There's something else. Nyxora's mental voice carried a note of wonder. During the bonding, I felt something I never expected. The neural link we've created, it's not just temporary, it's permanent. Even if the ceremony technology fails, we're connected now. Kalen felt it too, a warm presence in the back of his mind that was distinctly her. Not the alien coldness of Kithrin technology, but something wholly individual and beautiful. Then we face this together, he decided. Show me how to project genuine human consciousness patterns. Kaylin, you don't understand. If you open your mind that completely, while connected to the Kithrin network, I understand perfectly. He reached out through their link, grasping her consciousness with his own. But I also understand something else. You said humans were unique because we maintain individual identity during consciousness transfer. What if that's not just a survival trait? What if it's a weapon? Through the link, he felt her sudden understanding. Human consciousness wasn't just resistant to collective integration, it was antithetical to it. Every human mind was a closed system that could choose to open itself to others, but could never be forcibly merged without losing what made it fundamentally human. If we project that into their network, we don't just collapse their collective consciousness, Kaylin finished. We immunize it. Every Kithrin mind will become individually aware, individually responsible for its choices. They'll become like us. That's not destruction, Nixera realized. That's evolution. Together, they opened their minds to the Kithrin collective not as victims or as weapons, but as teachers. Through the neural interface, genuine human consciousness patterns flowed into the alien network, carrying with them 10,000 years of human philosophy, art, literature, and the fundamental concept of individual choice. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Across 17 star systems, Kithrin minds that had existed as part of a collective for millennia suddenly found themselves alone, individual, responsible for their own thoughts and decisions. The shock of sudden self-awareness rippled through their network like a quantum wildfire. But instead of destroying them, it transformed them. It's working, Nixera whispered through their link. They're not dying. They wakening through the interface. They could feel the Kithrin collective dissolving not into death, but into millions of individual consciousnesses experiencing free will for the first time. The seed worlds were shutting down their integration protocols as their controlling intelligences grappled with the concept of choice. Some chose to continue their biological experiments. Others chose to abandon them entirely. Still others chose paths that had never been considered by the collective. The cascade is stabilizing, Nixera reported. The network is reforming as a confederation of individual minds rather than a collective consciousness. Kaylin felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep in his chest. We didn't destroy them. We made them human. Not human, she corrected gently, but individual, capable of choice, capable of growth. 3 months after what the galactic media had dubbed the wedding that changed everything, Kaylin stood in his office aboard Nexus Station, reviewing the first official diplomatic communication from the reformed Kithrin Confederation. The message was unlike anything in the previous Kithrin archives. Now, individual, signed by a being who had chosen the name, Synthesis of Nuth. It requested permission to establish cultural exchange programs with human colonies, expressing particular interest in human philosophical traditions and artistic expression. Sir, his aide appeared in the doorway. Your wife is here to see you. Kaylin smiled. Even 3 months later, the word wife still sent a warm flutter through his chest. Send her in. Nixera entered the office, and Kaylin felt the familiar tingle of their neural link activating. The connection had settled into something beautiful over the past months, not a constant mental chatter, but a warm awareness of each other's presence, an emotional state. Right now, she was radiating excitement, mixed with something that felt like anticipation. The medical reports came back from Dr. Cray's team, she said without preamble. Kaylin looked up from his desk, and the Kithrin neural interface is completely dormant. Whatever quantum cascade we triggered, it severed the connection to their network entirely. She moved to the window, gazing out at the orbital traffic around Nexus Station. For the first time in 20 years, my mind is entirely my own. How does it feel? She was quiet for a long moment, lonely, but also, free. She turned back to him, her mercury eyes bright with an emotion he was still learning to read. There's something else. The medical scans revealed some unexpected changes to both our neural patterns. Kaylin felt a flutter of concern through their link. What kind of changes? The consciousness bonding ceremony didn't just create a temporary link between us. It's been gradually restructuring our neural pathways to be more compatible. Dr. Cray thinks that within another few months, we'll be able to share memories, skills, even sensory experiences directly. And that doesn't worry you. Nixara smiled. Kaylin, I spent 20 years with alien technology in my skull, connected to a collective consciousness that saw individual identity as a flaw to be corrected. The idea of sharing my mind with someone who chose to love me. She moved closer to his desk. That's not frightening. That's miraculous. Through their link, he felt the depth of her emotion, love, gratitude, and something deeper that he was only beginning to understand. The neural bonding had given them more than just telepathic connection. It had created a partnership of consciousness that was uniquely human in its foundation on choice and consent. There's been another development, she continued. The Veltar Empire has officially disbanded the military faction that collaborated with the My father and his co-conspirators are being held for trial, and the Empire has requested human assistance in identifying other species that might have been subjected to similar integration experiments. Meaning, we're not the only ones, Kaylin. The Kithrans had agreements with multiple species across this galactic arm. There could be dozens of beings like me, individuals carrying dormant Kithran technology, waiting for activation signals that will never come now that the collective has dissolved. Kaylin leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of new responsibility settling on his shoulders. They'll need help adjusting to individual consciousness. Yes, and humans are uniquely qualified to provide that help, given our experience with quantum consciousness coherence. Nixara's excitement was palpable through their link. Kaylin, we have the opportunity to guide an entire transformation of galactic civilization. Instead of species existing as collectives or hierarchies, we could help them discover the strength that comes from individual choice and cooperation. You're talking about a complete restructuring of interstellar politics. I'm talking about evolution, the next step for intelligent life in this galaxy. She moved around the desk to stand beside his chair. The Kithrans thought they were pursuing perfection through forced unity. But what we showed them, what humans have always understood, is that true strength comes from individuals choosing to work together. Through their neural link, Kaylin felt her vision of the future, a galaxy where every intelligent being had the freedom to choose their own path, where cooperation was based on mutual benefit rather than forced integration, where diversity of thought and experience was valued rather than suppressed. The Consortium Council has already approved preliminary funding for what they're calling the Individual Consciousness Initiative, he told her. Admiral Reeves has been assigned to lead the military aspects, while Dr. Cray heads up the scientific research, and us. Kaylin stood and took her hands in his. Through their link, he shared his own vision, not just of the political and scientific challenges ahead, but of facing them together as partners in every sense of the word. We're going to do what humans have always done best, he said. We're going to prove that the impossible is just another word for not tried yet. Nixara laughed, and the sound resonated through their neural connection like music. You know, when I agreed to this arranged marriage, I never expected to fall in love with me or with being human, both. She leaned closer, and he felt her consciousness brush against his in a way that was intimate beyond anything physical. Though I'm beginning to think they might be the same thing. Outside the office windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but the galaxy they illuminated had been fundamentally changed. Across 17 systems, newly individual Kithran minds were making their first free choices. In hidden laboratories on a dozen worlds, beings with dormant alien technology were waking up to the possibility of liberation, and at the center of it all, two people who had chosen love over fear were preparing to guide their species toward a future none of them could have imagined. The CEO's bride had indeed held a past that could have destroyed everything he knew. Instead, she had shown him a future worth building together, and in a galaxy suddenly full of individuals learning to make their own choices. That seemed like the most human outcome of all. The end.